Hi everyone, it's Nicole Spohr and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm excited to share some new cards featuring brand new April 2022 release products from My Favorite Things to create these birthday beer type cards. I think these would be great for masculine type birthdays. I've had a lot of requests for more masculine type cards. And keep in mind, you could totally turn, especially I think this large friendly beer mug, Die-Namics, into butterbeer. Honestly, when I first saw this die, that's what I thought of. I'm not a beer drinker, and so I thought this really reminded me of the butterbeer that you can get at Universal Studios in the Harry Potter world. That's where my mind goes. But regardless of that, I had a blast coloring my image. I started with white die cuts for both the Frosty beer mug and the Pint-Sized Dynamics, which you can see over there on the left side of the screen. We will color those here in a little bit. I'm using different shades of earth tones, yellow reds, and some cool grays for my mug. All of these markers are going to be listed down in the description below the video here on YouTube, as well as over on my blog. So definitely check that out. I really kind of felt like I went outside of my normal colors for coloring in these beer mugs, as well as just tried some different color combinations that you might not necessarily think of, including like the E59 and the E08 for the large Frosty mug here. I'm concentrating that down near the bottom, and my colorless blender was my best friend for all of the coloring. I have left the coloring in the video today, so it's a little longer just because I've left the coloring in. I know a lot of you like to see the coloring. If not, feel free to fast forward. But I did want to kind of show my process. With the Frosty beer mug dynamic, you actually also get like the inside of the mug, I guess I would call it. It's kind of a rounded rectangle, and then you get the die to create the shape in the mug that I just created with markers. I didn't use those dies. Instead, I used my markers to create that. You'll also notice it's pretty imperfect. That's definitely what I'm going for, and I'm using really long brush strokes with my marker to help give me that look that I want for my mug. I'm going to work on the color and the interest of the glass first, and then I'm going to use my colorless blender as well as some of my other markers to give the illusion of the bubbles inside of the beer mug. Now, I opted not to create the entire long rectangular shape. I'm going to do more of a little half shape that I created with a couple of shades of markers. Again, it's imperfect, but that's totally what I wanted here. And then I'm going to go in with my colorless blender, and it's like magic. It moves that ink around or away from where you touch the marker to the paper to the ink, and it kind of moves it away, and you're left with these nice light areas which resemble bubbles. I like doing this for underwater ocean scenes and all kinds of things. I absolutely love that. Let's make the the mug handle also colored with some cool gray markers. You'll notice that I tried to keep it really light for the handle. I want it to have that look of a heavy glass mug. And I'm even going to add some little white lighter areas to this. I'm using my colorless blender to help smooth out some of the rough edges from my other markers and from that coloring. And then I'm going back in because I almost got rid of too much of it, I guess, if you will. This was super fun to color, and I literally colored this in seconds while watching a baseball game. Yay, baseball's back. That was really, really fun. I am going in with YR23 and YR27 and adding a few little dots and things with those markers in addition to the lighter areas with my colorless blender. And I should have zoomed in earlier. I just realized it. I was a little too into the baseball game, I guess. And I'm going to add some little dots to the handle and to the base of the mug. Not quite as many, but I kind of like that look there. Now there is, pardon me, some foam for the top of the mug. I had to work on this more than I had to work on the mug. I am using the cool grays as well as the yellow, more of the yellow, I think, the yellow-red markers. And we're going to add color to the foam to kind of go with the mug, I guess, if you will. I actually found a pre-printed card on Pinterest that inspired the coloring for the top of the foam here on my mug. I'm incorporating a little YR30, which is a really light yellow. It's called a yellow red. That's why it's a YR, but it's definitely more yellow. And then I'm going to go in with some of the YR24. I kept building on this. In fact, I colored a little bit more of this even after I had placed this on my card. But we're going to add some little dots, and you can see how those are really pronounced more than I would like. And so I'm going over the top of them then with YR30 and even some colorless blender, and that's going to mute them. YR30 has quite a bit of colorless blender in it. So that's going to help soften some of those harsh dots. And that's a great tip for all kinds of different coloring. So this is a big die, and I want some sort of background that is really going to showcase this image. And so I racked my brain thinking, what do I have in my stash that I could use to really make this the star of the show, but still add some interest to the background? I already knew that I was going to use a greeting from the incredible Here's to You stamp set. I love the fonts and the style in the sentiment stamp from My Favorite Things. And so I knew I was going to stamp that in black, but I want something interesting for the background. And that is what we're going to work on next. We're going to do my favorite technique of some stenciling with a little text print over the top. You've probably seen me use it already in the past, but My Favorite Things has some of my all-time favorite background stamps as far as text stamps go. There's I think it's called Ghoulish Greetings for Halloween. They have the Christmas one that I've used a lot, and then they have the birthday one. And so I thought the birthday one is going to be fantastic for my card today, as long as we pick a color that's not going to take away from the beer mug. So I'm still working on that foam. I needed to deepen and darken a couple little areas where it's overhanging the mug. The great thing about Copic markers is you can keep using them and coloring over what you've done and keep working with it, and it's not going to pill the paper. That's one of my very favorite things. This is the Simon Says stamp in the round stencil, and I liked it because I felt like the little dots, or the circles, I guess, will really kind of reinforce the feeling of the beer mug. I am going to be using Simon Says stamp Positively Saturated inks in Latte and Cappuccino, and I am creating darker areas in some places and lighter in others. I'm actually not stenciling the entire thing. I think I didn't quite get enough. I really want it to be darker kind of on the diagonal through the center. The great thing with stencils is you can always line it back up and add a little more. Without re-inking my blending brush, I just added a little more color to the upper right and lower left corners so they're a little more faded. Then I have my birthday background stamp already in my MISTI, and I stamped it once on the paper in the MISTI. So we're going to use second generation stamping on our actual panel, which will help keep it really light and maybe even faded in certain areas. And that is with, again, the Latte ink. As the ink dries, it will fade just a little bit more, but I love it. That is exactly what I wanted for my background. I'm super happy with that. In fact, we're going to do that for our second card background as well to kind of keep it consistent, even though we're going to use different dies and a different greeting. Now I'm going to figure out where I want my mug to go on my card. We're going to pick a sentiment from the Here's to You stamp set. I'm going to use Happy Beer Day to You. Like I said, I love the fonts and how they've laid them out. I like the little double lines. I think these are just super classic. I love them. I'm using some VersaFine ONYX black ink to stamp that for that nice black crisp greeting. I've placed some foam adhesive on the back of my mug and I'm going to center that right above my greeting. We'll put some foam adhesive along the top edge of the foam for the beer mug. And then we're going to just pop that down in place. My background panel measures 4 by 5 1/4. So it's slightly smaller than A2 sized, meaning when we place this on our white top fold card base, it will have a white border all the way around. At this point, I like my card, but I decided to add some little leaves around it. Now, I don't have any hops leaves in my stash. And so we're going to make the detail Elm Leaves from Simon Says Stamp work. I was looking for a pop of color for my card. I like it as is. I think it's really cute, but I think a little green leaf is going to really add to it. So, like I said, I'm going to take those Simon Says Stamp Detail Elm Leaves and we're going to die cut them from white cardstock just like we did with the beer mug and then add them to our card. You can see this is where I decided to add a little bit more of the yellow red 24 as well as some colorless blender and a little more cool gray to my foam. Once I had it on the background, I could kind of see where I felt like it needed a little bit more color. Here are those Detail Elm Leaves. I honestly just looked through my stash for something that was the right size and scale, and this seemed like it would work really well. I am using some green markers. I'm using green 21, 28, and 29. I'm kind of getting the color on the leaf, and then I'm going to add in my darker colors. I do want to say that I ended up kind of cutting each leaf apart. I'm not really using the stem. I have foam adhesive underneath the beer mug, as you saw, and so in order to tuck these underneath the edge, I didn't really want to lift the mug up or try to pull it up and tear my paper, so I'm going to kind of trim them all apart and tuck them around the base of the mug. I think it helps ground it a little bit. The sentiment underneath also serves as a great little grounding source for the mug, but I think the leaves around the base add that pop of color that I'm looking for and kind of extend that base out a bit. I'm going to keep working my color here until I get it the way I like. You'll notice I went back and forth and blended. And then I'm going to kind of play around with my placement. And I've already trimmed part of this, but I'm going to go ahead and just snip those two apart, and I think I'll get a lot better look. I'm going to glue those down. I'm going to use some reverse tweezers to kind of clamp them down in place until the glue dries. These are going to be adhered directly to the background and not popped up with foam adhesive. And I really like these. Adding leaves to my design was inspired by a card I saw by Alberto. He drew his and colored them. I definitely needed some dies for mine, but I liked that addition of green and the hop sleeves around his beer mug. So I thought I would see what I could do with some dies in my stash. I'm going to blend out with G21 just like I did before. Now this leaf is a little bigger. There's foam adhesive underneath the handle on my mug. So I do trim this up a little bit, including along one of the rounded edges of the leaves to make it work. So I'll see kind of where I think that's going to go. I'll snip a little bit of that off, and then we'll just hide the fact that that has a little straight edge underneath the edge of the mug. I'm going to clamp that in place and allow the glue to dry while we work on the mugs for the second card. As I mentioned earlier, these are called the Pint-Sized Dynamics. I've die cut all of them from smooth white cardstock as well. I actually didn't even trim the dies apart. I just ran them through my die cutting machine like they come, all tabbed together. And while they're still in my cardstock, I think only one of the mugs or glasses came out of the cardstock. I just placed it back in there, and then I'm going to color everything in. I'm going to keep it pretty similar to the large Frosty mug. However, I am going to try to use some different colors of brown. I've listed those, or brown or yellow. I've listed those marker colors again down in the description below the video here on YouTube, as well as over on my blog. I did try not to go towards the top of the mug, but you can tell I forgot a few times, and so I really had to work to kind of get rid of some of that dark color, especially if it was going to be a mug that ends up not having foam at the top. I probably wouldn't have had to have worked quite so hard on this one because that one does. You could die cut the foam twice and have enough for all of them if you want to do that. I ended up just doing it just like this, where I'm only going to have the foam on 4. I love all the different shaped glasses here. I did start with the mug that's it's the teeny tiny version of the big one we just did, just to kind of keep that consistent. I'm even drawing in the little lines on here. The coloring did not take me long at all. Keeping that color scheme pretty neutral and similar, I guess, definitely helped. We're going to use the colorless blender to add those light areas into the mug, just like we did before. And I'm going to let that dry while we move on to our next mug. And so I did try to do like maybe 2 each of each color combination or so. Some of them probably definitely don't look the same, but that's fine. I just wanted variety. So some dark beer, some light. And I think the repeating design of this is really going to work. I'm thinking 2 lines, and then we're going to use Have a Happy Birthday right in between, using the exact same background as before. I am going to speed up the coloring. I've left it in, but I am going to speed it up just a little bit to save some time. I really have been trying to embrace a little less perfection with my Copic coloring, and I think the coloring has improved. There's always room for improvement is my feeling for most things, probably everything actually. And so I have really just been trying to try out some new things. Not be afraid to mess it up, because most things can kind of be fixed. I mean, look at the top of that mug where I just took my colorless blender and tried to move some of that color away. These images are small anyway, and I think they're going to look amazing no matter how you color them. Nice deep dark one in that. I'm going to start popping out some of these. They look so much better out of the cardstock. Obviously left in the cardstock I can overcolor and kind of make a mess, and it's great. But they look so much better once they're popped out of that negative space. I really love that there's the 2 different options with the large Frosty mug. Again, it's like the butterbeer mug. I think it would really be fun to do like a Harry Potter themed card and make it like butterbeer. I think that would be cute. And then the little teeny tiny ones. We're going to do another dark, a little bit lighter than the other one, but more along the dark lines there. For the foam, often I would use a combination of YR30 and 31. And then for the foam on the top of each, we're really going to just kind of keep it pretty similar to our Frosty mug, and go in with some yellow reds, yellow red 24 a lot, 30, 31, and a few little gray dots here and there. These are pretty teeny tiny, so I'm not going to worry too much again about being super perfect. In fact, I think the imperfection really adds to the overall appeal of these. Even though these are small, I am going to be popping all of these up with foam adhesive on my card. I'm going to use the small square foam adhesive dots from Scrapbook Adhesives. I think that that will look really nice on the card background. I will be stenciling within the round, stamping the birthday text with 2nd generation, inking over the stenciling, and adding my stamped sentiment first, and then we will add all of the beer mugs onto the card with foam adhesive squares. Super simple, but I really love how these turned out. So I'm going to line up my greeting just like I did before, and I'm not super loving, I don't think it's super straight. I'm going to turn my MISTI to the side and follow the grid lines on my MISTI door to help line up that stamp. I couldn't see with my Altenew craft mat underneath, so I grabbed that piece of cardstock to help me be able to line that up. VersaFine ONYX black ink. I love it. So nice and crisp and black. Great coverage. It's my favorite ink for stamping a sentiment and having it show up really well. And then we're going to add all of these great little mugs with foam adhesive squares. I'm going to start just left of center. Each row is going to have 4 mugs or glasses. I laid them out on my work table so I had an idea of which 4 I wanted to put in each row. I'm just cutting apart a small foam adhesive square for the glass. I felt like the stem needed some foam adhesive under it to make it a little more secure, but I didn't have anything quite small enough as far as foam adhesive to fit. I do end up with foam adhesive squares all over my craft room, as always. Do you guys have that too? I even found one, in the basement. I try to vacuum them up or pick them up right away, but sometimes they just migrate all over the house. But I love these foam adhesive squares. We will place this entire panel on a white top fold card base just like we did before, and we will have 2 amazing beer themed birthday cards. Again, I think these would be fantastic for the men in our lives. Not necessarily just for men, but I know a lot of times that is a struggle. Here is a look at both finished cards. The supplies I used to create my cards are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Here is another video featuring my favorite things that you might be interested in. I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to my Patreon members. If you would like to become a member of Patreon, please click the link in the description below. We would love to see you over there. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel. Click that like button, and don't forget to hit the notification bell to always be notified when I have a new card making video. Thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll see you next time.